There is a concrete pier in the Bay of Pozzuoli, off the coast of Italy, that has been sitting in salt water since before the Roman Empire had its first emperor. 2,000 years of waves, 2,000 years of salt grinding into every pore of the stone. By every rule in a modern engineer's handbook, that pier should have dissolved back into the sea about 19 centuries ago. Instead, it did something that is supposed to be impossible. It got stronger, not held up surprisingly well. Stronger. The same seawater that eats a modern marine pier alive in a couple of decades has been quietly making this one harder the entire time it has been standing there. And here is the part that should genuinely bother you. We know exactly why our concrete dies. We have known for over 100 years. We can point to the precise mechanism, name the chemical reaction, and draw you the diagram. And we keep building the broken version anyway. Hold on to that because it is the whole story. There is a reason our buildings come with an expiration date, and it is not that the Romans knew some lost magic we cannot recover. It is worse than that. It is a decision. Somebody somewhere weighed the options and chose the version that fails, and the reason why is going to land on you like a brick at the end of this. But first, let us talk about the cracks that heal themselves. For decades, archaeologists looked at Roman concrete under a microscope and saw what looked like a mistake. Scattered all through the material were these little chunks of white, bright, chalky specks called lime clasts. The textbook reading was simple and a little condescending, sloppy work. The Romans, the thinking went, just had not mixed their batches well enough, leaving lumps of unreacted lime sitting in the matrix like flour clumps in a bad cake. That explanation sat there, unquestioned, for years. Until a materials scientist at MIT named Admir Masick looked at it and got annoyed, because it did not make sense. The Romans refined this recipe over centuries. They built an empire on it, harbors, aqueducts, domes, the works. These were people obsessive enough to standardize their construction across 3 continents. And we are supposed to believe that after all that, they were too careless to stir the bucket properly? So Masick's team went back to the clasts, and what they found rewrote the entire story. Those white specks aren't a flaw. They're the repair system. When a crack forms in Roman concrete, and concrete always cracks because that is just physics, water then seeps in. The moment that water reaches one of those lime clasts, the clast becomes reactive. It dissolves, then recrystallizes as calcium carbonate, and that new mineral grows directly into the crack and seals it shut. The building patches its own wounds. In the lab, the team cracked a Roman-style sample and a modern control sample, then ran water through both. Within 30 days, the Roman version had sealed itself completely. The modern sample was still leaking. The thing everyone had dismissed as bad workmanship was, in fact, the single cleverest feature of the entire material. The flaw was the point. But sealing cracks is only half of what makes this stuff strange. The other half is how they made it, and the Romans, it turns out, did something that sounds completely backwards. They made it hot, on purpose. Modern practice says you slake your lime first. You mix it with water in advance, calm the reaction down, and make it safe and predictable. The Romans didn't bother. They threw quicklime in dry and let it react in the mix, generating real heat, hundreds of degrees of it, right there in the batch. They called it hot mixing. And that heat unlocked chemistry that calm, pre-slaked lime simply cannot produce. It's what scatters those reactive clasts through the material in the first place. It slashed curing time, which meant the Romans could build fast enough to throw up structures at the pace of an empire that was always in a hurry. And it bought them one more thing, a bonus almost nobody mentions. The stuff could set underwater. Think about what that unlocks. You cannot pour an ordinary mix into the sea and expect it to harden. The water ruins it. But Roman concrete cured while submerged, which is the only reason their harbors exist at all. They could build directly into the waves. Which brings us back to that pier in Pozzuoli, and the most counterintuitive fact in this entire video. Modern marine concrete and seawater are enemies. Saltwater is the thing engineers spend fortunes trying to keep out, because over a few short decades, it will reduce a coastal structure to rubble. Roman marine concrete treats seawater as a building material. As the sea percolates through it, it dissolves the volcanic ash packed into the mix and grows brand new minerals in the gaps, interlocking crystals with names like altobermorite and philipsite. They are platy, plate-shaped, and they knit through the matrix like reinforcement bars made of stone, locking everything together and resisting fractures. Here is the kicker. Altobermorite is so difficult to produce that when modern labs want it, they need high heat, and they get back only a tiny grudging amount. The ocean grew it inside those Roman piers for free slowly over centuries just by being the ocean. Pliny the Elder, writing in 79 CE, described their sea concrete becoming a single stone mass, impregnable to the waves and stronger every single day. He was not being poetic. He was describing, 1,500 years before chemistry existed as a field, a material that strengthens itself in the one environment that destroys ours. Researchers are now eyeing those same minerals for a job we find almost impossibly hard: safely encasing nuclear waste. So that is Rome. And if the story ended there, you could file it under lost recipe. Very cool, moving on. But it does not end there. Because the Romans were not the only ones who built things that refuse to die. And once you start looking, the pattern gets unsettling. Travel east to Japan to the wooden pagodas. There are hundreds of them, some over 1,000 years old, standing in one of the most seismically violent places on Earth. Japan gets earthquakes the way other countries get rain. And in 1,400 years of recorded history, the number of these tall wooden towers that have collapsed from shaking is 2. That's it. 2. How? The answer is a single column running up the center of the tower, called the Shinbashira. And the Shinbashira does something that makes no sense to a modern structural engineer. It carries no load at all. In some designs, it does not even touch the ground. It hangs suspended from the top of the structure like a pendulum, dangling down the core of the building, doing apparently nothing, except it's doing everything. When the ground shakes, the stacked floors of the pagoda do not move as one rigid block. Each story slides independently against the ones above and below it, swinging in opposite directions. Engineers describe it as a snake dance. And as they sway, they knock against that free-hanging central pillar. The pillar absorbs the blows. It bleeds the earthquake's energy out of the structure, floor by floor, blow by blow. So the building flexes and shudders and absolutely refuses to fall. And before you write this off as ancient folklore that we have outgrown, here's the detail that should stop you cold. The Tokyo Sky Tree, a 634-meter steel and concrete broadcast tower, one of the tallest structures on the planet, was built with a modern version of the Shinbashira running up its core. A central column engineered to cut seismic vibration by up to around 50%. We did not move past the ancient idea. We dug it back up and copied it. Keep going, cross to Greece, to the temples. The Parthenon and its cousins are made of massive marble drums stacked into columns with no mortar holding them together. Dry stone. And again, the instinct is to call that primitive. They did not have good cement, so they just piled rocks. Wrong. The lack of mortar is the design. When an earthquake hits, those unmortared drums slide and grind against each other, chattering, and all that friction soaks up the seismic energy. Then, because each block weighs tons, their own colossal weight settles them right back down into place. The structure recenters itself. It is a building designed to dance through a quake and then stand back up straight. The Greeks went further. They locked key stones together with iron clamps, and then they poured molten lead into the channels around that iron. The soft lead did 2 jobs at once. It cushioned the joints, absorbing vibration, and it sealed the iron away from air and water so it could not rust. That detail matters more than it sounds because of what happened in 1898. A Greek architect named Nikolaos Balanos took it upon himself to restore the Parthenon. He reset the stones with iron clamps of his own, crude ones, and crucially, with no protective lead coating. He undid, without understanding it, the one thing keeping the iron alive. And over the following decades, those bare clamps did exactly what bare iron does. They rusted, they swelled. And as they swelled, they cracked the ancient marble apart from the inside. 24 centuries of earthquakes had not damaged the Parthenon the way one well-meaning restoration did in a few decades. Modern teams have since had to go back in and undo Bolanos's work entirely to fix the fix. Hold that image of rusting iron splitting the stone. We are coming back to it, and it is going to be the whole answer. Back to Rome for a moment, to the Pantheon, because it's hiding something. Its dome has been the largest unreinforced concrete dome on Earth for nearly 1,900 years. Nothing we've built since has topped it. And if the Romans had poured that dome out of a single uniform material, it would have collapsed under its own weight before they finished it. So they didn't. The concrete changes as it rises. Down at the base, it's dense and heavy, packed with hard travertine. Halfway up, it shifts to lighter tufa, and at the very crown, where the structure could least afford the load, they switch to volcanic pumice, rock so light it floats on water. That gradient cut the dome's weight by something like 30% compared to a uniform build. And they weren't done shaving mass. They mixed empty clay vases, amphora, straight into the structure, hollow pockets of nothing to lighten the load. Even the famous coffers, those beautiful sunken squares everyone photographs, aren't just decoration. They scoop mass out of the dome exactly where it isn't needed. Every part of that ceiling is doing structural math. 19 centuries later, it's still standing, still open to the sky, still unmatched. Now go to Persia, into the desert, because this is the one that breaks people's brains. The Persians built structures called yakhchals, and they used them to make ice. In the desert, with no fuel, no power, nothing. Just physics and the night sky. Here is how. They dug shallow pools and let water sit in them overnight. On a clear desert night, the open sky acts like an infinite cold sink. Heat radiates straight up off that water into space, and the water can freeze even when the air around it never drops to freezing. Radiative cooling, working for free all night long. Then before the sun came up, the ice was hauled into a huge insulated dome, fed by underground aqueducts called qanats, and ventilated by wind catchers that pulled hot air up and out through a chimney effect, dropping the temperature inside far below the desert's brutal daytime heat. And the part nobody mentions, to insulate those domes against the sun, they sealed the walls with a special mortar mixed from ingredients like egg whites and goat hair. A refrigerator in a furnace of a climate, powered by absolutely nothing, made of mud, eggs, and an understanding of the sky. While we run air conditioners that strain the power grid every time there is a heat wave, people 2,000 years ago were storing summer ice with a building. So now you've seen it. Rome, Japan, Greece, Persia, wildly different cultures separated by oceans and centuries, all building things engineered to outlast empires, self-healing, self-centering, self-cooling. Structures designed not for 50 years, but for forever. And we, with all our science, build things that start dying in a few decades. Which finally brings us to the question in the title. Why don't we build them today? And the honest answer is the one nobody wants, because it isn't a mystery and it isn't a lost secret. It's the steel. Walk past any modern construction site and look at the concrete before they pour it. Inside the forms is a cage of steel reinforcement, rebar. That steel is the magic that lets us build the modern world. It lets concrete handle tension, which lets us build thin, build tall, build fast, build the bridges and towers and parking garages that define every skyline on the planet. And it is also, quietly, the thing that's killing all of it. Corrosion of embedded steel is the single most common cause of concrete failure on Earth. Water and salt work their way through the concrete, reach the rebar, and the rebar starts to rust. Rust takes up more space than steel does. So as it grows, it pushes outward with enormous force and cracks the concrete apart from the inside, the exact same mechanism that split the Parthenon's marble after Balanos stripped away the lead. We just build it into every structure on purpose millions of times over. Roman concrete has no rebar. None. There's no steel buried inside it to rust, swell, and tear it open. That's not a coincidence, and it's not nostalgia. It is the reason it can last. Temples built today without rebar or with stainless steel instead are still being designed for 1,000-year lifespans. The technology to build for a millennium exists right now. We choose not to use it on almost everything we make. And it gets more deliberate than that. We didn't just accept short lifespans as the price of steel. We actively engineered our concrete to fail faster because we optimized for the wrong thing. Modern concrete is designed to gain strength fast, to hit a guaranteed number by day 28, so a schedule can be met and a building can open on time. But that rapid curing creates tiny shrinkage cracks throughout the material, micro cracks that act like highways, letting water reach the steel sooner and rust it faster. Roman concrete cured slowly over years, growing tougher the whole time. Our priorities, speed, predictable strength on a deadline, compatibility with the steel we can't live without, are precisely the trade-offs that throw away durability. It is a choice. It was never ignorance, and nobody in the chain has a reason to choose differently. There is no quarterly profit in a building that lasts 2,000 years. The faster it's poured, the sooner it's sold. The sooner it crumbles, the sooner someone gets paid to pour it again. The version that fails is the version that makes money. So the version that fails is the version we build. Except the bill for that bargain is now coming due, all at once. Modern concrete lasts somewhere between 50 and 100 years, and a colossal wave of mid-century construction is hitting the end of its life right now. Bridges, dams, buildings poured in the post-war boom, all aging out together. The repair tab runs into the trillions. We built a disposable world, and the disposal date is arriving. And here's the flip on the whole ancient equals primitive story, the part that turns this from a history lesson into an argument about our future. Engineers ran the numbers on the carbon cost. Roman-style concrete would only need to outlast our modern formulations by about 41% for buildings to break even on cumulative carbon emissions over time. Just 41% longer, and the ancient way is also the greener way. Durability stops being sentiment and becomes a climate strategy, which is why 2,000 years after Pliny watched a pier turn to stone in the sea, companies are now racing to commercialize the Roman hot mixing recipe to put self-healing, rebar-free, ocean-strengthening concrete back into the ground.